This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Well, you're going to get some more oomph on the 27th of March. You're at the Omni. 4,500 fans are there. And check this out. You got Tully, Arn, and Lex taking on Barry Windham, Bob Armstrong, and Baron Von Raschke. What a six-man that is. 4,500 fans are here on the 28th. You're back in Atlanta doing TV. Of course, you're going to do the TBS show. And there's a pro taping that night. You're scooting up to Philadelphia. The next day, you're in Asheville, North Carolina, for a matinee show, and the evening show is in Charlotte at the Coliseum. I want to mention this is kind of a big deal. It's March 29th, 1987. Some of our listeners automatically know what that is. That's the date of WrestleMania III. And Jim Crockett is doing a matinee show in Asheville where it's Arn and Lex Luger teaming with Tully to take on Nikita, Barry, and Wahoo. The main event is Ole and Big Bubba in a street fight. And then that night, we've got Ric Flair and Barry Windham, the tag belts with Ricky and Robert challenging Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez. And of course, Arn is going to be teaming with Lex to take on Wahoo and Brad Armstrong in Charlotte. I guess it makes sense to be in your own backyard. Charlotte was the spiritual home and the home of the office for Jim Crockett Promotions. What was the buzz amongst the boys? What do you remember hearing in the locker room and the chatter and the car rides and whatnot about WrestleMania III?
Well, I felt like by being in Charlotte, we were in our hometown.
Yep.
Did you get any numbers on that?
I don't know if it was a sellout. I assume it's not because it's not noted here.
Okay. I bet it did well. And it was one of the only ways to combat WrestleMania 3. I mean, you were talking oranges and apples. This was like, hey, the Cirque du Soleil came to town, plus dragsters on one end of the lot, NASCAR on the other end of the lot, Cirque du Soleil on the other end, and it was all part of one show. We were still bringing and offering our stories, our storylines, the talent that we had, and the performances and the stories that we had in place. That's what we offered as an alternative. And in those days, I think we knew that it was because all you had to do was watch one of their shows and they were selling characters and everybody had an ice cream bar. Everybody was on a lunchbox. You know, all the marketing was through the roof of those guys. We feel like we had the superior product as far as a wrestling product, but they had that, hey, the circus is in town, and it was a big deal. WrestleMania 3 definitely we knew was going to be a big deal.
I'm curious from your perspective, you know, when you see all that's happening up there with the rock and wrestling and the cartoons and, as the guys called them back then, the dolls. Of course, we know they're LJN action figures, but still, you're hearing these crazy payoffs of what a guy got from WrestleMania, and that they were literally like moving boxes of cash at the merch stand. And as the legend goes, the Iron Sheik got a check for 50 grand for just a quarter for his quote unquote doll. And some of that has to be trickling down. Do you remember there being chatter amongst the boys of, hey, are we playing for the right team here? Or was it more of a, we don't do that kind of stuff as far as the WWE presentation?
I can speak for us. I can speak for Tully, myself. You know, a lot of the guys, you know, that were really part of the core of Jim Crockett Promotions, Dusty, all those guys. You know, the guys that were there for the long haul, we were a little bit embarrassed by what they were putting out there, to be honest with you. A lot of it was such ha-ha and such, you know, Tennessee high spots taken to a whole nother level. And there was just so much gaga and ha-ha about it that for a lot of us, you know, it was, don't include us as part of that, because that's not what we do. We were insulted to a degree, and I think at that particular time we were making pretty damn good money. I know, you know, I was making more than I ever dreamed, and you know, it was hit and miss on every house wasn't sold out, but
right.
enough of them were that we're making a damn good living. And I don't think any of that core Jim Crockett, the rock and roll, the Midnight, all those guys at this point were at a point where, hey, it was them against us when we were in war, and we were going to win the war by attrition because we could just outwork all those guys.
Not arguing that. Did you get a chance to see WrestleMania 3? Did you have a friend get a video cassette at some point? Did you ever see the show?
I'm sure I saw bits and pieces down the road when it was free to see.
Sure.
But I didn't make arrangements to tape it, or certainly didn't buy it. Like I said, we were at a war. They were the enemy.
I think in that era, it was mostly closed circuit anyway, sort of the precursor for traditional pay-per-view. But I know that it became a VHS machine and just a cash cow for them. Most people remember WrestleMania 3 for a handful of things. The retirement of Roddy Piper, certainly. I feel strongly that saving money is important. If it's not something we worry about now, boy, we are really going to worry about it later. And I want to help you get out of debt faster and do it with cheaper monthly payments. I'm talking to you if you're in a 30-year loan. Now is the time to take years off of your loan. We're routinely helping our listeners cut 5, 10, even 15 years off their loan. And you can do this without perfect credit, with no money out of pocket. You've just got to start at savewithconrad.com. But mostly people talk about the Macho Man and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and of course the main event with Hogan Andre. Did you think the Hogan Andre thing was as box office as it was presented on TV for the WWF, or was it just not your cup of tea in that era?
Well, I just, the performer in me, and, we all think we're bookers at some point. I just wondered what they were going to do, because I didn't think they would beat the Giant.
Right.
Nobody had before. I don't know why anybody would. So that was a little bit shocking. And that was one of those things where you went, wow, okay. Well, they did it. They passed the torch, and they did it in the right way. And that was one of those things that they did do right. Steamboat and, if
Savage.
Savage. If you're a performer in this industry, and you haven't seen that match and understood just how much went into it and how much performance was involved, and just remembering where you were in that match and just everything about it. If you're not proud of that and you don't hold that up and go, you want to see something spectacular, you want to see what professional wrestling can be, put that match on.
I wonder about yourself, as a guy who took a lot of pride in his work in the ring, just bell to bell. Everybody knows, looking back, how great that match was with Steamboat and Savage and all the false finishes. But over the years, it's almost been joked about. Ricky Steamboat has even said, boy, Randy planned everything. He wrote everything down, and he had everything planned out, almost move by move for the entire match. And these days, it's pretty common for the guys to spend a lot of time putting their matches together. But there's almost this old school vibe that says, you don't do that. You just call it in the ring. And on the one hand, I understand the wisdom behind that, as of, you don't just want to go through a series of memorized spots and moves. You want to see, what is the audience into? Give them more of that, and really vibe off of the crowd, for lack of a better word. What are they buying? What are they hating? What are they booing? What are they cheering? That sort of deal. I guess what I'm driving at is, this is the first time I remember someone talking about a match being that sort of pre-planned. We're going to do this, and then you're going to do that, and sort of step by step. When you first heard that that's how the match was put together, how did that strike you? Are you a little too old school for that? Or could you see, well, it's the biggest platform ever. I get why they were wanting to be perfectionists. Certainly Savage did.
You know what my initial gut reaction was? You're kidding. How the hell did they remember all that?
Right.
Because I couldn't have. Not in 1,000 years for $1 million could I have remembered all that. It's just, there was so much volume. There were so many false finishes. It rocked back and forth. It was one of those things that you got lost in in the false finishes because it was it was almost like a 25-minute high spot. It literally was. And how they were able to pull that off and remember everything, I guess, was because they were so good at their craft at that particular time, and I guess they must have went over it and over it and over it and over it and over it some more until it just became second nature. That's all I can figure. I couldn't have pulled it off. No way.
It's just fun to look back in hindsight and think about WrestleMania 3 and how important it was for business, especially knowing the way Jim Crockett Jr. felt about it.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.